They were supposed to be gone. Two little girls lost and buried beneath the snow and silence of Everpine. No signal, no footprints, just a mother's cry echoing through the storm, and a loyal dog who refused to stop searching. Sergeant Ethan Cole had uncovered something no one was meant to find. A secret buried deep within the frozen mountains. And as the storm raged around him, the missing children waited in the dark, praying for a miracle that even heaven seemed too far to send. But God was already moving, in the shape of a weary soldier, a fearless dog, and a love strong enough to melt the cold itself. Because sometimes, miracles don't come from angels, they come from those who never stop fighting. The snow fell in thick, whispering sheets over the mountain town of Everpine, Colorado. It was the kind of cold that numbed thought and memory, swallowing even the sound of one's own breath. Sergeant Ethan Cole adjusted his collar against the wind, his gloved hand brushing the badge on his chest, a habit more of comfort than pride. Ethan was 35, broad-shouldered but lean, his face lined by fatigue and silent regret. A faint scar traced from his left temple down to his jaw, the pale souvenir of a hostage rescue gone wrong years ago. His eyes, a gray-blue like winter sky before a storm, held that hollow steadiness of a man who'd seen too many calls end with body bags. The town knew him as calm, methodical, sometimes distant, but they didn't know that every missing child case burned a hole through him, because he once had a daughter, Grace, who vanished when she was 7. No one ever found her. The search had ended, but Ethan's guilt never had. Rusty padded beside him, his loyal German shepherd partner, 5 years old, sable and tan fur peppered with early gray. His left ear bore a small notch from an old K9 training accident. Rusty wasn't just trained to track scent. He seemed to read Ethan's silence, to move when Ethan couldn't speak, to stop when his handler's thoughts turned dark. In the white blur of falling snow, they were two silhouettes moving through a frozen world, bound by duty and loss. Ethan's radio crackled faintly through static. Dispatch to all units. Be advised. Amber alert issued for 2 missing juveniles, female age 10. Lily and Emma Parker, last seen near Everpine Ridge Campground at 1700 hours. Mother on scene, requesting search team. Ethan's jaw clenched. Another set of children lost to the woods. Same time of year, same forest. The storm made it worse, visibility dropping by the minute. He pressed the mic. Cole here. I'm 2 miles from the ridge, moving in with Rusty. The road turned to ice beneath his boots as he climbed the slope toward the campground. Faint light from a single SUV flickered through the storm. A woman stood beside it, wrapped in a thin red coat, her breath trembling in the cold. That was Sarah Parker, the girl's mother. She was in her late 30s, tall but delicate in frame, with auburn hair plastered wet against her pale face. Her eyes, green and raw from crying, darted wildly between the trees as if expecting her daughters to reappear. Years of city life had not prepared her for the brutality of mountain weather. Her hands shook uncontrollably, clutching a child's pink glove. Ethan approached slowly, removing his beanie in silent respect. "Ma'am, I'm Sergeant Cole," he said, voice steady, low. "We'll find them." She swallowed hard, her voice thin and breaking. "They were just playing near the trail, only for a minute. I turned around to grab the thermos and—" She couldn't finish. Rusty sniffed at her boots, tail low, ears forward, already catching the trace of something faint. "Which direction?" Ethan asked. Sarah pointed shakily toward the tree line. "Northwest Trail. We come here every winter, but they've never gone that far." Ethan nodded, motioning Rusty forward. "Stay here with the ranger when he arrives. Keep the lights on." Then, almost as an afterthought, softer, "We'll bring them back." He didn't say alive. He didn't have to. The forest swallowed him and Rusty whole within minutes. The wind howled through the pines, sending flurries swirling like ghosts. Rusty's nose pressed to the ground, his body tensing with alert precision. Ethan followed the leash slack, scanning for tracks. They appeared faintly, 2 sets of small boot prints, side by side, half filled with fresh snow. "Good boy," he murmured. Rusty wagged his tail once, but kept moving. For half an hour, the trail wound deeper into the wilderness, the temperature dropping fast. Ethan's breath fogged in the beam of his flashlight. He tried to focus on the patterns of the prints, one heavier than the other, meaning one girl was probably carrying extra weight or limping. Then the prints stopped. The ground ahead was churned up, a scattering of pine needles and tire marks half buried beneath snow. His pulse spiked. He crouched low, brushing aside powder to reveal a boot tread, heavy, size 11, not from a child. Nearby, a torn piece of fabric clung to a branch. Blue wool with a silver button, a child's coat. He exhaled through his teeth. They didn't wander off. Someone took them. Rusty barked once, sharp and urgent. He circled, nose twitching, before bolting toward the right, into thicker woods. Ethan followed, ducking under branches, stumbling over hidden roots. Rusty stopped at a shallow ridge where the snow broke unevenly, revealing a slide of disturbed earth. Below, at the base of the hill, a black van sat half buried in snow, engine still faintly ticking. No license plates. Ethan's flashlight cut through the darkness, glinting off something on the ground. A child's mitten. He crouched, his stomach twisting. The back door of the van was open, footprints leading away toward the river. 3 pairs, 2 small, 1 large. Ethan's training snapped into place. He radioed, "Dispatch, possible abduction vehicle located, coordinates pending. Suspect on foot heading west along riverbed." Static answered. No signal. He cursed under his breath. The storm had killed comms. Rusty growled softly, hackles raised. "Easy," Ethan whispered. He moved along the bank, scanning. The faint sound of a man's voice drifted through the snow, angry, muffled. Then a whimper. A child. Ethan's chest tightened. He crouched behind a fallen log, peering through the frost-laced branches. 50 yards ahead, near the frozen bend of the river, a man in a dark parka dragged a struggling girl, Lily, judging by her yellow scarf. The other twin, Emma, was tied to a tree, trembling. The man's face was partially covered by a scarf, but his build was unmistakable. Tall, broad, with a slight limp. Tattoos snaked up his neck. Ethan's mind raced. He recognized that gait from old case files. Derek Holt, a local felon once tied to child trafficking near Denver, disappeared 2 years ago. Now here he was, back in the snow, resurrected like a ghost. Ethan's heart hammered against his ribs. Rusty trembled beside him, awaiting command. "Not yet," Ethan mouthed. He drew his weapon, steadying the barrel through the scope. But the wind was fierce, shifting his aim. He needed to get closer. As he crept forward, his boot snapped a branch. Derek spun, eyes narrowing. "Who's there?" He shoved Lily down, pulling a pistol from his jacket. Ethan rolled behind a tree, cursing silently. Rusty growled low. "Go!" Ethan hissed. Rusty launched forward like a streak of muscle and snow, hitting Derek square in the chest. The man fired once, bullet whistling past Ethan's ear, but Rusty's jaws clamped onto his forearm, forcing him down. Ethan charged in, disarming the man with a swift kick, sending the gun skidding across the ice. Derek screamed, swinging wildly, landing a punch on Ethan's jaw. Pain flared white. The world narrowed to noise, breath, and the crunch of snow beneath boots. Ethan pinned him, twisting the arm until he heard the crack of bone. Rusty held position, teeth bared, blood staining his muzzle. "Where's the car?" Ethan growled. Derek spat blood. "You think there's only me?" Then a whistle, shrill and distant from deeper in the woods. Ethan's stomach dropped. More than one. He cuffed Derek roughly, grabbed the girls by their arms, and looked up at the swirling snow. "We're not safe here," he muttered. Rusty barked in agreement. He hoisted Lily into his arms, motioned for Emma to hold his jacket. The forest roared with the coming storm. Behind them, faint headlights flickered through the trees. More men coming. Ethan pushed forward into the white blur, his breath sharp with fear and resolve. Somewhere behind, Derek laughed through his broken teeth. "You won't make it out, cop." Ethan didn't answer. He only gripped the girls tighter, whispering, "Hold on." The snow closed in like a curtain, erasing footprints, faces, and every trace of safety. The storm had turned the forest into a shifting white maze, where every tree looked like the last, and the wind howled like something alive. Sergeant Ethan Cole pushed through the knee-deep snow, his arms tightening around Lily while Emma clung to his jacket, her small hands trembling. Rusty stayed close, his breath puffing in white clouds, his left flank streaked faintly with blood from the earlier fight. The beam of Ethan's flashlight wavered over the trees, just enough to glimpse the faint trail behind them before the wind erased it. He knew they had minutes, maybe less, before the rest of Holt's crew caught up. He had seen the look in Derek Holt's eyes, the grin of a man who wasn't afraid to die if it meant others would too. They reached the edge of a frozen creek, the ice groaning under the force of the storm. "We can't cross here," Ethan muttered. "We'll follow it downstream. Maybe we can reach the ranger outpost." His voice was calm, but his mind was racing. The girls were shivering violently, their lips blue. He had to keep them moving or they'd freeze before the kidnappers ever found them. Rusty whined softly, then stopped, ears turning. Ethan followed his gaze. A faint orange flicker glowed between the trees ahead. Firelight. He knelt, placing Lily down gently and lowering his voice. "Stay behind me. Don't speak unless I say so." They crept forward until the light came into view. A small camp tucked under the rock ledge, 2 snowmobiles parked beside it. 3 men huddled around a fire, rifles slung carelessly nearby. Their clothes were rugged, mismatched, militia types. One of them stood out, a tall man with a military haircut and a jagged scar down his cheek. He moved with precision, controlled, unlike the others. His name, Ethan would later learn, was Travis Keene, ex-National Guard turned mercenary. In his late 30s, he had the hard, sinewy build of someone who'd spent his life running from authority, his expression always hovering between boredom and contempt. He had once been a soldier who believed in purpose until the army left him behind after a mission in Kandahar went wrong. Now he worked for whoever paid enough to forget. Beside him sat Vince Rowe, shorter, heavy-set, his beard crusted with frost. Vince had once driven long-haul trucks before gambling debts pushed him into smuggling. His laugh was hoarse and nervous, and he drank from a metal flask like it held courage. The third was Thomas Vega, the youngest, barely 25, wiry with restless eyes that never stayed still. He wore a tattered denim jacket under a hunting vest and twitched whenever the wind rose. Ethan crouched behind a fallen pine, weighing his options. There were too many to fight outright, especially with the girls. But if he could distract them, Maybe he could steal one of the snowmobiles and escape with the children. Rusty growled low, picking up the scent of gunpowder. Ethan whispered, "Quiet, buddy. We're ghosts tonight." He took a deep breath and picked up a rock. With a flick, he threw it into the woods behind the camp. The sound cracked sharply through the wind. Vince turned first. "You hear that?" Travis raised a hand. "Quiet." He stepped away from the fire, scanning the darkness through the scope of his rifle. Ethan motioned for the girls to move closer to the snowmobiles. But as they did, Emma slipped, her boot crunching on ice. The sound was small, but in the dead silence of the forest, it was thunder. "Hey!" Travis barked, swinging the rifle. Ethan didn't think. He moved. "Run!" he shouted, grabbing Lily's hand. Rusty leaped ahead, barking fiercely, drawing gunfire away from the children. Bullets split the air, one striking the snow inches from Ethan's boot. He returned fire, hitting Vince in the shoulder. The man screamed, dropping his gun. Thomas panicked and fled into the trees. Travis ducked behind a rock, his eyes cold. "You're making a mistake, cop!" he shouted. Ethan didn't answer. He pushed the girls behind a fallen log. "Stay down!" Rusty lunged again, knocking Travis off balance, teeth tearing into his sleeve. The mercenary slammed the rifle butt into Rusty's side. But the dog didn't let go until Ethan fired once, striking Travis in the leg. The man collapsed, snarling in pain. "Don't move!" Ethan ordered, keeping his gun trained. Travis glared up, blood staining the snow around him. "You have no idea what you just stepped into," he hissed. "We're not just smugglers, Cole. You think you're rescuing these kids? They were taken for a reason." His voice was venomous, eyes gleaming with something almost triumphant. "You're already too late." Ethan's pulse hammered. "What are you talking about?" Travis just smirked. "Ask the sheriff when you get back, if you make it." He laughed, coughing blood. Ethan knocked him unconscious with a swift blow and turned back to the girls. Lily was crying silently, Emma clutching her sister's hand. "It's okay," he said softly. "We're almost out." But the unease in his gut told him this was no ordinary abduction. He loaded the girls onto one of the snowmobiles and helped Rusty climb behind. The dog was limping but alert. As they sped through the dark forest, the storm screamed around them, claws of wind scraping their faces. Ethan squinted against the snow. He could see the faint outline of the ranger outpost's radio tower blinking faintly through the blizzard. Relief surged through him, until Rusty growled, low and deep. Headlights flared behind them. Another snowmobile. A shadowy figure was gaining fast, rifle glinting in the light. Ethan swerved sharply, the snowmobile skidding over ice. The pursuer fired. A bullet tore through Ethan's sleeve, grazing his arm. He gritted his teeth, turned the handle sharply, and aimed for the river bend ahead. "Hold tight!" he shouted. The snowmobile hit the frozen bank, sliding down in a spray of white powder. Rusty leapt off first, barking furiously. Ethan covered the girls with his body as the pursuing vehicle crashed against a tree, exploding in sparks. For a moment, the world was pure noise. Fire, snow, wind, and fear blending into one violent storm. When silence finally fell, Ethan raised his head. The attacker lay motionless by the wreck, face obscured by snow. Rusty limped over, sniffed once, then barked sharply. "He's gone," Ethan murmured, more to himself than anyone. He helped the girls stand, wrapping them in a thermal blanket from his pack. Above them, the blinking light of the outpost was closer now, less than a mile. They trudged forward through the drifts. Every step burned Ethan's lungs. His wounded arm throbbed, and Rusty stumbled more than once. But neither man nor dog stopped. By the time they reached the cabin door, dawn had begun to bleed faintly through the clouds. The sky was a muted silver, the forest eerily calm. Ethan kicked the snow from his boots and pounded on the locked door. After a moment, it opened to reveal Ranger Paul Dwyer, a middle-aged man with a thick beard, gray hair, and a round face weathered by years of mountain duty. His flannel jacket smelled of wood smoke, and his expression was startled but kind. "Good God," he said. "Get in here." Inside, the cabin glowed with firelight. Dwyer handed Ethan a first aid kit and cocoa for the children. "Radio's down," he said grimly, "but the main line might still reach the sheriff." Ethan froze for a heartbeat. "The sheriff," he repeated quietly. Something in Travis's voice echoed in his mind. "Ask the sheriff when you get back." Rusty growled low again, as if sensing his unease. Outside, the wind moaned through the trees, carrying with it the faint sound of a distant engine. The storm wasn't over. Neither was the hunt. The storm had eased by morning, leaving Everpine wrapped in silence. Snow weighed heavy on the pine branches, bending them like old men under burden. Inside the ranger outpost, the fire crackled low, shadows flickering across the wooden walls. Ethan sat at the table, his wounded arm bandaged, fatigue pulling at his eyes. The two girls slept nearby under thick wool blankets, their faces pale but peaceful at last. Rusty lay curled at their feet, his breathing steady, his left flank still wrapped in gauze. The dog's ears twitched occasionally, reacting to sounds only he could hear, some distant echo in the forest that still refused to rest. Ethan couldn't stop thinking about Travis Keene's final words. "Ask the sheriff when you get back." It wasn't the kind of threat meant to scare. It was the kind meant to reveal. Ranger Paul Dwyer was stirring oatmeal on the stove, his large frame moving slowly but with the ease of habit. He was in his late 50s, with a thick gray beard and calm brown eyes that carried the stillness of someone who'd spent more years talking to trees than people. His flannel jacket hung loosely from his shoulders, and his hands, scarred and sun-browned, looked capable of fixing anything from a broken lock to a broken bone. He turned to Ethan, voice deep and gravelly. "You should get that arm looked at properly once the road clears. Sheriff Briggs will send a chopper by noon if we're lucky." Ethan's gaze lifted sharply. "Briggs knows we're here?" Dwyer nodded. "Sure. I radioed last night after you passed out. Took a while to get through, but he answered. Sounded worried, said to sit tight." Ethan's jaw clenched. Sheriff Allen Briggs, the man he'd served under for nearly 8 years. Briggs was in his early 60s, tall, broad-chested, always wearing that worn Stetson hat even indoors. His hair, once dark, had turned silver at the temples, giving him the look of an old Western hero. The townspeople trusted him. To them, Briggs was the man who rebuilt the force after the drug raids of 2010, a straight talker with gravel in his voice and justice in his handshake. To Ethan, though, Briggs had always been harder to read. Too calm under pressure, too willing to bury inconvenient truths. Ethan respected him, but he didn't trust him blindly. Not after losing Grace. The night his daughter vanished, Briggs had been the one to tell him to stop searching the mountain after 3 days. "Sometimes," the sheriff had said, "the forest keeps what it takes." Now, as Ethan sat watching snow drift past the window, those words echoed bitterly. He rose, walked to the radio set by the wall. "You got his frequency still open?" Dwyer nodded. "Channel 3. Ethan pressed the mic. "Sheriff Briggs, this is Cole. We have the Parker twins safe. One suspect in custody, others possibly still out there. Static hissed. Then a familiar voice came through, rough but steady. Copy that, Cole. Good work, son. Sit tight. Extraction's on the way. Ethan frowned. The term extraction wasn't standard police language. He pressed again. Sir, I need medical for the girls and Rusty. When can we expect the rescue team? There was a pause. Too long. Then, soon as the road's clear, stay inside until then. Do not engage anyone approaching the outpost. Understood? The transmission cut abruptly. Rusty lifted his head, growling faintly. Dwyer looked up. That's strange. He didn't even ask for your coordinates. Ethan's instincts prickled. He walked to the window and saw movement. Two dark figures emerging from the tree line, snow spraying around their boots. They weren't rangers. Military jackets, helmets, rifles. He turned sharply. Dwyer, get the girls into the back room, now. The ranger didn't argue. He scooped up Emma while Ethan grabbed Lily and moved them behind a stack of crates. The knock came seconds later, 3 hard raps. Sergeant Cole? A voice called. This is Sheriff Briggs's team. We're here to take custody of the children. Ethan didn't answer. He motioned Rusty to stay low, hand on his pistol. The voice outside was too crisp, too formal. Then came the metallic sound of a rifle being loaded. The door burst open. 2 men stepped in, their uniforms bearing no badges. The first was tall, buzz-cut, mid-40s, with icy blue eyes and a clean-shaven jaw. He moved with military precision. His name tag read, Reed. The second, Owen Marsh, was younger, sandy-haired, a little jumpy, but his rifle was steady. Orders from the sheriff, Reed said flatly. Hand over the children. Ethan stood his ground. I'll hand them over when I see Briggs. Reed's eyes narrowed. You're not in command here. He stepped forward, but Rusty growled deep, lips curling. The tension snapped. Reed raised his rifle. Ethan fired first. The bullet hit Reed's shoulder, spinning him backward. Marsh ducked, returning fire, splintering the wooden doorframe. Dwyer lunged from the side, striking Marsh with a fire poker, knocking him down. Rusty leapt on Reed, teeth sinking into his forearm. The room filled with smoke and chaos. Go! Ethan shouted. He grabbed the girls and ran through the back exit into the storm again. Behind him, Dwyer shouted, I'll hold them off! His voice was lost in gunfire. They plunged into the snow, the cold biting like knives. Rusty ran ahead, bleeding again from his shoulder. The girls clung to Ethan as he led them toward the tree line. The outpost behind them glowed briefly, then exploded. The shockwave threw them to the ground. Fire lit the snow orange, and for a moment, the forest seemed to burn. Ethan's vision blurred. He heard nothing but the ringing in his ears and the muffled cries of the girls. He forced himself up, pulling them toward a narrow ravine that opened near the frozen creek. There, half buried in snow, stood an old hunter's cabin, its windows boarded, its roof sagging but intact. Inside, he rasped. Rusty pushed the door open with his snout. The cabin smelled of dust and pine oil. Ethan barred the door with a plank and finally let himself breathe. The girls huddled near the cold fireplace. Are they gone? Lily whispered. Not yet, Ethan said. He looked at Rusty, whose fur was matted with blood. Stay with them. He peered through the cracks in the boards, watching shadows move through the trees. Whoever Briggs had sent wasn't here for rescue. They were here to erase. Ethan's pulse slowed, his mind turning sharp. He checked his weapon, reloaded, and pulled from his pocket a crumpled scrap of map Dwyer had drawn earlier. A back route through the ridge toward the old mining tunnels. It might be their only escape come nightfall. Rusty whined softly, nudging Ethan's leg. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I know. We can't trust anyone now." As the wind picked up again, Ethan sat beside the children, watching the light fade. Somewhere beyond the flames of the burning outpost, Sheriff Briggs was already calling it in. A tragic accident, he'd say. The snow fell thicker, muffling the world. Ethan stared at the dark trees and whispered to himself, "If the forest keeps what it takes, I'll take something back this time." The night returned heavier than before, the snow now a constant whisper that erased sound and scent alike. The forest stretched endlessly in all directions, a cathedral of ice and shadows. Ethan Cole trudged ahead, his flashlight flickering weakly in the dark. The cold bit through his gloves, his wounded arm stiff and throbbing. Behind him, the two girls followed in silence, their breath fogging in the beam of light. Lily clutched a small wooden carving she'd found in the old cabin, a token of comfort, while Emma kept one hand buried in Rusty's fur as the loyal German shepherd limped beside her. The dog's movements were slower now. Every step left a faint trail of blood in the snow. But his eyes, amber and sharp, stayed alert. He never once let his guard drop, even when his body begged for rest. Ethan paused at a ridge and scanned the horizon. The distant glow of fire still marked where the ranger outpost had been. He could almost feel the echo of the explosion in his bones. Dwyer's sacrifice gnawed at him like a splinter. He'd been a good man, the kind who didn't deserve to die for someone else's secret. The guilt pressed down, heavy and personal, but there was no time for mourning. Somewhere behind, men were hunting them through the snow. He had seen that kind of pursuit before, methodical, patient, and merciless. The map in his pocket, drawn hastily by Dwyer, showed a route through the old mining tunnels beneath Black Hollow Ridge. If they could reach it, there might be an exit near the frozen river that led back to Everpine's northern road. But the path was brutal, and the storm was worsening. Rusty stopped suddenly, nose twitching. He barked once, low and short. Ethan froze. A faint beam of light cut through the trees behind them, headlamps. "They found us," Ethan whispered. He turned to the girls. "We keep moving. No matter what you hear, don't stop." They slipped and stumbled down the ridge, snow swallowing their legs with every step. The wind roared louder now, covering the shouts from behind. Ethan glanced back and saw 3 figures moving fast, silhouettes armed with rifles and flashlights. One of them carried a radio, the light blinking red. They were closing the distance. By the time they reached the frozen creek, Rusty's pace faltered. Ethan knelt, rubbing the dog's neck. "Stay with me, buddy." The dog licked his gloved hand once, eyes unwavering. Then a voice echoed across the clearing, cold and amplified. "Cole, you're surrounded. There's nowhere to go." The man who spoke stepped into view, tall and broad, dressed in a dark parka with fur lining the hood. His face was angular, tanned from years in the field, with eyes the color of wet steel. This was Captain Marcus Vale, head of the sheriff's tactical unit, a man Ethan once called friend. Vale had served in the Marines before joining law enforcement. At 42, he still carried himself with soldierly discipline. Broad shoulders, clean-shaven jaw, and a posture that spoke of command. He had been Ethan's partner years ago during the Denver trafficking cases, the same ones that had cost Ethan his daughter. Vale had been there the night Grace disappeared, and he had been the first to suggest calling off the search. Now, seeing him again in the snow, Ethan understood too late why Briggs had chosen him for this mission. "Marcus," Ethan called out, lowering his weapon but keeping his tone sharp. "You don't have to do this." Vale's reply was steady, emotionless. "You should have stayed quiet, Cole. Briggs doesn't want the girls hurt, just contained." "Contained?" Ethan barked, stepping forward. "They're children." Vale's expression didn't change. They saw something they shouldn't. The deal was simple. Deliver them, erase the trail, and this all ends clean. Rusty growled, sensing Ethan's anger. The girls clung tighter to each other, terrified. Ethan's mind raced. He needed time, a distraction. "You still believe him," he said. "Briggs doesn't clean messes, Marcus. He buries people." Vale hesitated for half a heartbeat, his jaw tightening. Ethan saw it, the flicker of doubt. But then another voice cut through the storm. "Enough talking!" It was Agent Reed, arm in a sling but very much alive, limping from the blast. He raised his pistol. "Drop the gun, Cole!" Ethan moved first. He shoved the girls down into the snow and fired twice. Reed staggered back, hit in the chest. Vale dove for cover, shouting, "Flank him!" Rusty lunged forward, teeth bared, tackling a third man trying to circle them. Gunfire shattered the frozen stillness. Bullets cracked through the trees, sending splinters raining down. Ethan grabbed Emma and Lily, dragging them behind an outcrop of rock. "Stay down!" he yelled. The air reeked of gunpowder and cold metal. Rusty barked furiously, defending their position. One of the attackers, Cal Morrison, a lanky man in his 30s with a scruffy beard and frost-bitten cheeks, charged through the snow with a knife raised. Cal had once been a miner before debt, and desperation turned him into muscle for hire. His teeth were yellowed, his grin manic. "You're finished, cop!" he shouted. Before he could strike, Rusty slammed into him, knocking the knife aside. The two rolled in the snow until Ethan fired once more. Cal fell still, blood seeping into white powder. Vale's voice came again, raw and desperate. "Ethan, stop this! Think about what you're doing!" "I am!" Ethan shouted back. "You taught me to protect the innocent, remember?" The silence that followed was short but heavy. Then Vale emerged slowly from behind a tree, rifle lowered, his breath visible in the cold. "You can't save them, Ethan. You can't fight Briggs. He owns this town." Ethan's reply was steady, deadly calm. "Then maybe it's time someone took it back." A crack split the chim air. A single shot. Vale staggered, eyes wide, a dark bloom spreading across his chest. He dropped to his knees. Behind him stood Owen Marsh, the nervous younger agent, his rifle trembling in his hands. His face was pale, his lips blue from fear. He was going to kill you," Owen stammered. Ethan aimed his gun but didn't fire. The young man dropped the weapon, hands shaking. "I didn't sign up for this. Briggs said it was a containment op, not this." His eyes darted toward the girls. "I've got a truck at the Rangers line. I can get you out." Ethan studied him for a long second, then nodded. "You try anything, and you won't get a warning." "Understood," Owen breathed. They moved quickly, covering the bodies with snow. Rusty limped beside Ethan, exhausted but alert. They followed Owen through the winding forest until the first glow of dawn began to stain the horizon pale gold. The storm was finally breaking. The sound of an engine hummed faintly ahead. When they reached the truck, Owen handed Ethan the keys, his face taut with guilt. "You should know. Briggs isn't just cleaning up. There's a list. Names. Yours, mine, everyone who knows what happened." He swallowed hard. "Everpine's not the end of it." Ethan said nothing, only tightened his grip on the keys. "You did the right thing tonight," he said quietly. Owen shook his head. I doubt that. He turned and disappeared into the trees. Ethan climbed into the driver's seat. The girls huddled beside Rusty in the back. The dog laid his head in Lily's lap, tail barely thumping once. As the engine roared to life, Ethan looked out at the endless forest behind them. Smoke still rose faintly where the outpost had burned. We're not done, he murmured. Not yet. Then he drove toward the pale edge of sunrise, where the mountains waited like sleeping giants. The sun climbed weakly over the mountains, a pale disk fighting through clouds that still hung like bruises over Everpine. The storm had finally broken, leaving the world glazed in a brittle calm. Ethan Cole drove the old ranger's truck along a snow-choked back road, the tires crunching through ice, the horizon flashing silver in the morning light. Behind him, the two girls huddled under a thick blanket, their cheeks flushed pink from exhaustion. Rusty lay across their laps, bandaged and still weak, but his tail thumped faintly whenever Ethan's voice cut through the silence. For a moment, it almost felt like peace. But Ethan knew better. Peace was a story people told themselves to survive the next battle. The radio crackled with static. He turned the dial until a weak signal came through. News of the explosion at the ranger outpost. The broadcast was calm, detached. Sheriff Briggs confirms the loss of Sergeant Ethan Cole and Ranger Paul Dwyer in the tragic blast that occurred overnight. Search efforts continue. Ethan's grip tightened on the wheel. He'd been declared dead. Good, he muttered. Let him think so. They reached the outskirts of town by midday, where the snow thinned to patches of gray slush. The once bustling Everpine Square lay quiet under the weight of winter. Storefronts were shuttered, Christmas lights hung forgotten. Ethan parked behind an abandoned feed store, checking the streets. No patrols, no movement. He turned to the girls. You'll be safe soon, I promise? Lily nodded weakly, her small hand finding Rusty's paw. Emma looked out the window, voice barely above a whisper. Will they come after us again? Ethan hesitated. Not if I stop them first. He had a plan, a dangerous one. The evidence he needed was buried in the sheriff's office, specifically in the basement archive that held sealed cases. If Briggs had kept records of the trafficking network, it would be there. But to get inside, he needed help. That's when he thought of Clara Hensley, the town's night dispatcher. Clara was 40, short and sturdy, with shoulder-length brown hair streaked with gray and eyes as sharp as broken glass. She'd worked every midnight shift for a decade, known for her dry humor and quiet defiance. Years ago, she'd blown the whistle on corruption in a neighboring county and been blacklisted from promotion. She didn't trust authority, but she trusted Ethan. He left the truck idling and walked through the alley to the back door of the communications building. Inside, the air smelled of stale coffee and burnt dust. Clara looked up from her desk, surprise flickering in her face. Ethan? She whispered, rising from her chair. They said you were... I know, he cut in. I need access to the archive. Briggs is behind everything. The abductions, the cover-ups. I can prove it. Clara frowned, rubbing her temples. You realize if you're wrong, that's treason. If you're right, it's suicide. I'll take either, Ethan said. She studied him a long moment, then nodded. The back elevator's still working. Take the service key. The building's empty till noon. She handed him a brass key marked Sub-Level B. You've got 20 minutes before Briggs comes in for his press briefing. As Ethan turned to leave, Clara grabbed his sleeve. Ethan, be careful. Briggs wasn't always dirty. Something broke in him after his wife died. Just don't let that happen to you too. He gave her a grim smile. I already did. The basement smelled of mildew and paper dust. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, flickering like dying fireflies. Ethan's boots echoed down the corridor as he reached the records room. He rifled through metal cabinets, fingers trembling from adrenaline. Case files on drug busts, disappearances, sealed warrants, until finally he found it. Operation Northwind. The label matched the name Travis Keene had mumbled before dying. Inside were photographs, cargo manifests, transfer ledgers, surveillance stills of unmarked trucks. The routes ran through Everpine's logging roads, disguised as timber shipments. One name appeared again and again at the bottom of each page. Signed, Sheriff Alan Briggs. Ethan felt his stomach twist. It was all there. Briggs had been trafficking children through the mountain corridors for years, using his badge as cover. He'd silenced witnesses, burned reports, erased names, including Ethan's daughter, Grace. At the bottom of the file was a single photo. A younger Briggs standing beside Captain Marcus Vale, both shaking hands over a seized crate marked Property of Northwind Logistics. The crate's serial number matched the one recovered from the crash site years ago, the same one from the night Grace disappeared. Ethan's breath caught. His hands trembled so violently he nearly dropped the file. Rusty whined softly, sensing his turmoil. Then footsteps, heavy, deliberate, growing louder. Ethan stuffed the documents into his jacket and ducked behind a shelf. The door creaked open. Briggs entered. Up close, age had turned him almost spectral. His silver hair was slicked back, his eyes sharp and pale blue like river ice. His coat hung open, revealing a revolver at his side. He walked with the easy confidence of a man who believed the world still belonged to him. "You're a stubborn man, Cole," he said calmly. "You should have stayed buried. The dead don't ruin careers." Ethan stepped out, gun raised. "You killed good people, Alan. Dwyer, Vale, those kids. My daughter." Briggs's expression hardened but didn't waver. "Your daughter?" he said quietly. "She wasn't supposed to die. She was leverage, but you wouldn't stop digging." He sighed. "You think you're the hero in this story, but you're just noise in the snow. I kept this town alive when the government forgot it existed. You want the truth? People don't care who bleeds, as long as they stay warm." Ethan's finger tightened on the trigger. "Then I'll make them care." Briggs drew first. The shot rang through the archive, deafening. Ethan dropped behind a cabinet, firing back. Bullets tore through metal and paper. Sparks flew. Rusty charged forward with a fierce snarl, clamping onto Briggs's arm. The sheriff cursed, striking the dog with the butt of his gun, but Rusty refused to let go. Ethan rose, aimed, and fired once. The bullet hit Briggs square in the chest. The old man staggered, disbelief flickering across his face. He looked down at the spreading red bloom and chuckled weakly. "You finally learned to shoot first." Then he collapsed. Silence returned, broken only by Ethan's ragged breathing. He knelt beside Rusty, checking the wound on the dog's side. "You're still with me," he whispered. Rusty licked his hand weakly. Ethan gathered the files, stuffed them into his bag, and carried Briggs's badge from the floor, a small, cold circle of tarnished silver. By the time he stepped outside, Clara was waiting by the truck. Her eyes widened at the blood on his jacket, but she didn't ask. Instead, she handed him an old radio. "You should go before the state cops arrive. I'll leak the evidence. They'll know everything by dawn." Ethan nodded, glancing at the two sleeping girls in the back seat. Then maybe this town has a chance. He climbed into the truck. Rusty curled beside him, snow beginning to fall again. Light, almost gentle this time. As the mountains faded behind them, Ethan looked toward the open road and thought of Grace, of the forest that had taken her, and the small miracle that had led him here again. Sometimes redemption didn't come in prayers or medals. Sometimes it came in the shape of two children still breathing, and a wounded dog that refused to die. When the snow finally melted over Everpine, it left more than footprints behind. It left proof that miracles are not things of the past. They still happen quietly in the hearts of those who refuse to give up. Sometimes God doesn't send thunder or angels. Sometimes He sends a weary soldier, two frightened children, and a wounded dog to remind the world that faith still moves through ordinary lives. Maybe that's the lesson tonight. That even in the coldest seasons of our lives, there is a warmth no winter can touch. The warmth of courage, love, and grace. So if you're listening to this story, remember, your act of kindness today might be the miracle someone else has been praying for. May God bless you and those you love. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs hope tonight. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We love seeing how far these stories travel. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more true stories of faith, courage, and redemption. Because somewhere out there, another miracle is waiting to be told.